Good morning everyone and welcome to the first virtual meeting of the Greater Manchester Economy, Business Growth and Skills Scrutiny Committee. This meeting is being live streamed to members of the public in line with the latest legislation enabling our meetings to take place virtually during the coronavirus pandemic. Apologies have been received from Daniel Meredith and Stephen Homer. So if I move on to item 2, I'd like to invite nominations from the committee to appoint the Chair of Economy, Business Growth and Skills Scrutiny Committee for the municipal year 2020-21. Do I have any nominations? Would the committee like to nominate a chair, please?
Yes, sorry.
Does someone want to nominate? Just speak out loud, you can be heard.
Can you hear me? Forgive me,
yes.
I think I took myself off mute. Thanks very much indeed. I would like to nominate Councillor Holly to continue as chair of this scrutiny committee. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And is Councillor Holly seconded?
Yes, Councillor Winstanley from Wigan, I'd second that nomination for Councillor Holly.
Excellent. So congratulations, Councillor Holly. Please can I invite you then to take the chair for the remainder of the meeting?
Thank you, members of the committee, for installing me again as chair of this meeting, and I will hope to not let you down. So I think obviously we've got new technology here, which some of us are struggling with, and others are far more adept. But we will get through this, and clearly just bear with us, and that's for the public as well, in case there are any little glitches. So the first thing on the agenda then after that is to ask for nominations for vice chair, and I would like to nominate Councillor Winstanley to continue as vice chair. Will somebody second that?
Could I second that? Charles Rigby from Wigan.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. So are we all happy for Councillor Winstanley to be vice chair?
Yep.
Thank you. So the first thing then on the agenda after that really is a welcome and apologies. I think the first thing to do is obviously to thank you all for logging in. You know, we are learning, as I said before, about this, and we are quorate. And to the public, let me apologise for the slight delay in this meeting, because we were just having the odd issue in terms of people logging on. But I assure you, we are now all quorate. In terms of apologies, what apologies do we have?
We had apologies from Councillor Daniel Meredith and Councillor Stephen Homer.
Thank you. The next thing on the agenda then is to note the membership for 2020-21, which is obviously in the agenda papers, and there is a mixture of old and new, and that is good to have some sort of refreshing within the committee.
I think we've lost Councillor Holly.
Councillor Winstanley may assist.
Yes, thank you. Right. So let me just get to grips with the agenda. So it was, I think, we was just on the membership and noting the members for this forthcoming municipal year. So welcome to those new members of the committee, and I'm sure we look forward to receiving your contributions and your help in the work of this committee, and welcome back to those people who was with us last year as well. So thank you very much. I think item 4 is the Members' Code of Conduct and the Annual Declaration of Interests. Joanne, is there anything you want to add on that?
No, that's just for members to know, Chair, but also declarations of interest and everything. I think what we've done, we've sent out the blank form, but it is sent out as a PDF, so we will send out a Word version of that for members to complete and return to us. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I just encourage members, if they could complete that documentation as soon as they can and return it to the to the committee clerks. That would be really helpful, and then they don't have to sort of like chase those up. So if you could do that in a timely fashion, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. The next item is item 5, which is the terms of reference. Joanne,
so,
do you want to?
Yeah, members are just asked to note in the committee's terms of reference, Chair.
Thank you. Has anyone got any comments or observations on that? Are we happy to note those? I'll take that as a. Yes, I'll take that as an acceptance. Thank you. And the next item is the minutes of the 8th of November 2019. So can we accept those as a true and correct record of that meeting? Do you have a proposer?
Councillor Stanton from Manchester, happy to propose those, Chair.
Thank you.
Second, Councillor Rigby.
Thank you very much. All in favour? I'll view,
Yes.
I'll view silence as a yes. Right, okay. Thank you very much.
Councillor Winstanley, we did speak to Councillor Holly before, and we've requested that we move item 8 to the end of the agenda, as there's a part B item to that. So if we do need to go into private discussion, it's better if it's at the end of the agenda. So I wondered if the members would be okay with doing that.
Yeah, can I just confirm with members that we're happy to move the agenda around in that way?
Happy, Chair.
Agreed.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for that. So that moves us to item 9, which is the European Social Fund Commission activities, and I think that was the supplementary paper that we got, wasn't it, last week or earlier this week?
That's right, Chair. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So could I just ask? Hello. Yeah. Sorry.
Morning.
It will actually be Gemma Marsh that will be presenting this, Councillor Winstanley.
Gemma, thank you very much. Welcome to this virtual meeting.
Morning, thank you. And oh, we've got Councillor Holly back.
Got the chair back. I will step out of the way. You're on mute, Mike.
We can't hear Councillor Holly.
Yeah, I wasn't. I was on mute. So apologies. My screen went absolutely blank, and I do apologise for that. I don't know what happened. So as far as I'm aware, we've done the minutes. The business plan is going backwards, and now we're on the European Social Fund Commission activities.
Correct, Mike. Yeah, Gemma's just about to take us through it. Yeah.
Yeah, and we got Gemma Marsh to present on this.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay,
so obviously, as always, I take that the paper has been read. There's an awful lot of information in there, and where I would like to focus is some of the latter points around the Skills for Growth programme and the ability to use European Social Fund to support our youth work kind of post-COVID. So basically the paper just takes you through some of the background to the European Social Fund, where we are, the commitments, and obviously I will welcome any questions around that. For those who haven't kind of delved into European social funding before, it's split into what's called priority axes. So we've got inclusive labour markets and skills for growth, which obviously are absolutely critical across Greater Manchester. The paper then in section 3 takes you through some of the changes that the managing authority, which in this case is the Department for Work and Pensions, have made due to the impact of COVID. So European social funding is quite rigid in terms of its criteria, but some flexibility has been allowed, things like wet signatures, to allow us to continue and providers to continue to support residents across Greater Manchester. Section 4 then takes you through the delivery and the performance and a roundup of the contracts. And you can see, you know, even in light of COVID, we are at varied positions across, and we're working really hard with our providers at this moment in time to ensure that residents can still access. Many of them are now online, and you know, we are working with the flexibilities that we've got, to be fair, to make sure that we can do as much as physically possible. Section 5 takes us then, or section 4.4 takes us on to the new programmes. So the what is a co-financing organisation is actually where Greater Manchester is physically kind of in charge of the actual programme, which is fantastic, because what it's really allowed us to do is support things like further devolution and the growth of some of those programmes. So many of you will know from the past when Matt Ainsworth has come and spoken about things like Working Well, that is supported with an element of ESF as well. So the figures around there. One thing to note that GM is outperforming the Department for Work and Pension contract and the London contracts, and they're working very, very closely with the Department for Work and Pensions about flexibilities in that programme to ensure that we can support the kind of tsunami of newly unemployed people that we're expecting, but also not at the loss of those that are already within the kind of unemployed market and need our support at this time. The Skills for Growth programme is newly approved, and we've spent a bit of time to make sure that we get this right, given the complexity of what COVID has caused. And what we're trying to do is basically support our SMEs and support the people that are within those organisations to help adapt, retrain. So it's never been more critical, to be perfectly honest, in terms of £42 million worth of investment going into the economy. Done a huge amount of engagement work with local areas. We had a really good session with localities yesterday, actually, to help us design the specification for this. But it really will support kind of COVID recovery, but also focusing on kind of adapting and changing labour markets and the skills needs that our residents and our employed residents will have to kind of take account of going forward over the next few months and years as well. So we need to be flexible. And then the final one, I think many of you will have seen some of the announcements from yesterday around young people. So we know that young people will fare far worse in the labour market following this crisis. And we've been doing a huge amount of work to make sure that there is some positive messages going out to our young people. And this has now been picked up by, obviously, by leaders and by the Mayor of Greater Manchester in the development of some form of youth guarantee. And this is absolutely critical for us, and ESF will play a really pivotal part in this in terms of the amount of funding that is available. And it will span, ESF will span from 15 years old, but the actual youth guarantee potentially will support from 11 years old all the way up to 30. Because actually what we saw in the last recession was, you know, a huge impact on youth unemployment, but also following the kind of COVID, we are expecting to see spikes in NEET in every area, which is obviously something that you could predict, given that we've had many young people not in school for some time. So what we are going to try and do is develop that European Social Funding Programme to make sure that it fills the gaps, plugs the gaps, and works with localities. Like I say, there's an awful lot in that paper, and the recommendations are at the front of the report, but I would really welcome comments. Just to say now that Councillor Fielding has now joined following some internet issues, so there may be other points that Councillor Fielding wants to highlight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gemma. Before I throw it out to questions, can I ask one question in terms of the background information, and that's on Annex 2. We've got a point here that Greater Manchester continues to have a higher proportion of young people not in education, employment or training, i.e. NEETs, when compared to both national and regional averages. What are the principal reasons for this continuation?
I think sometimes it is about when the figures are collected. So actually localities have done a phenomenal job in reducing the NEETs across Greater Manchester pre-COVID. So actually we were falling more in line with national averages, but it's a whole host of kind of demographic issues that cause NEETs. And I think what we have done incredibly well is use the funding and the work that localities and partners have done to maintain that figure, although that figure still is higher than in other areas. I think localities have done a phenomenal job to try and keep it around that kind of 4,000 figure. I think the issue that we've got now is we just do not know what's going to come. So I think that the figures will fluctuate at different points in time, and I would like to get an up-to-date figure for the for scrutiny, if that would help, and look across the localities as well.
Yeah, I think it's important that we understand these figures. I mean, these are people who are basically being lost in a way, and it's so important that we that we up our game in this area. Nobody should be left behind, and as I've often said, the getting our skills right is the way forward in terms of economic growth, which, given, if you like, COVID-19, we need to have massive economic growth to pay for everything that we're going to have to incur in the future. So that's helpful, but I think, yes, you're right that we need to see some of the figures, and it'd be just helpful if you could circulate if you like, the figures you've got for the comparison, so we can see what trends there are, and if we should be getting slightly less worried or more worried. And I think it'll form a context for our debate, and certainly it'll reinforce the need that we do need to make sure that we are investing in our youth. So questions, please.
Councillor Holly, would you like Councillor Fielding to perhaps say something?
Oh yes, sorry. I'd obviously missed that. Sorry, I do apologise.
It's okay.
Councillor Fielding, welcome. I hadn't realised that you'd actually joined us. I probably missed the conversation, and I know you're always so committed in this area, so you're very welcome here.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose I'm going to find it quite. Oh, hang on. I ignored all the warnings about me being muted. Then, thanks, Chair. No, I'm glad that I'm able to join the meeting this morning. I had some technical difficulties that meant that I thought that I wouldn't be able to make it. But as soon as our internet was working, I've come back on. I find it difficult to add to what Gemma has said because I didn't catch everything. So I think the best thing for me to do really is just to support the response to any questions that members may have, because I'm at risk of just repeating a lot of the things that Gemma will have said in her introduction. So if that's okay with you, Chair, then I'll just support the responses to questions from members.
I think that's a sensible way forward.
Yeah. We have a question from Councillor Susan Howarth.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Hi, yeah, Sue Howarth. It's a question, Gemma and Councillor Fielding, around, I think, mainly page 2 and page 3, the blue table, and I suppose the general parts of the report. So thinking about the shares of the finance that there is control and influence of, is the split, the share really, what we would need around the difference between funding skills for those who are unemployed with no skills or low skills, and funding skills for those who have low skills and are often in poor job security and poorer wages, where we want to help them improve their employment prospects. Do you think I've described the sort of split right, really, and do you know that's what we deal with? And do you think the split is the way you want it at the moment?
Okay, I'll take that one. So yeah, I mean, this is historic. So it's one of those things that you'll all remember the kind of when we planned the ESIF programme, those splits were fundamentally kind of right, and they do merge between the two. So as you say, priority axis 1 is around those the labour market response, and does focus very much on things like working well and the kind of basic skills. What we have been able to do within the Skills for Growth programme is support it's more the transition and the progression. So in a kind of pre-COVID world, that Skills for Growth programme would have absolutely been kind of higher level skills, because we actually physically don't really have very much money for that. And following the local industrial strategy, that was where the need was. I think where we'll get to in the next kind of 6 months will probably be more around supporting those kind of new business models, those employees potentially that are furloughed to gain skills and then be able to progress into something new. So I think the splits are probably about right now that we can get cracking on the Skills for Growth programme.
Is that okay, Councillor Howard?
Yeah. Yes, thanks very much.
Councillor Holly, we have Councillor Stanton wishing to speak.
Okay, that's fine.
Hi there, can you see me?
Yes.
Perfect, thanks. Over the last 30 years, I suppose we've had pushing 3 recessions now, the early 90s, the global financial crisis, and that which we're heading into at the moment. And in Manchester specifically, we've not really fully recovered from the early 90s recession, let alone the global financial crisis yet, when it comes to those not in employment at perhaps some of the older parts of life. So our over 50s population, not employment is disproportionately high. The report does note a lot about assisting young people into employment, and I do think that's incredibly important that we do help them into employment. But what can we do to make sure that we're not overlooking those a bit later on in life that are still struggling from 2 recession cycles ago, because we need to help them back into work as well?
Thank you, Councillor. You're absolutely right, and I think we've been at risk of this is a kind of update paper. So actually all of the background information, a lot of the work and health programme and the working well that's mentioned in there is really quite centred on the over 50s, and obviously we've been working closely with the Ageing Hub and with Manchester as well in that space. The Skills for Growth particularly as well will pick up particularly that change in technology need for a lot of older residents within SMEs, and then the focus on the youth one is purely under the priority axes. That's where the funding was that we needed to move forward. We've been really clear within our employment and skills recovery work that Councillor Fielding has been leading on, is nobody should be, there should not be a detrimental impact on anybody within that system. So what we've actually done is kind of segmented that labour market, to be honest, and making sure that everybody gets the support that they need. So although there's been a focus on youth in the last couple of days with the Mayor picking up a youth guarantee, we have pushed that to kind of up to the age of 30. But actually it should form a blueprint then. So we're working very hard with our LEP, for example. Actually then it should be if you're committed to the residents of Greater Manchester, then we should also be able to support. So there is huge amounts of funding available within the current ESF programmes, and again, I can get figures on those.
Am I allowed to come back in?
Yes.
Thank you, and it's really good to have that clarification. I think it's important that it is robustly contained in the messaging that we put out, including in reports like this, because totally take on board everything you say is accurate there. To people outside of perhaps elected members, some of the language might be slightly less accessible, and it's just really important that we do continue to note that we are trying to look out for everybody across society rather than just at the young end. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stampson.
Councillor Holly, a next question from Councillor Rigby.
Yep.
Hi, I have a couple of points. It's I'm just wondering, in Annex 2, it mentions the sub-regional variances. Is there any examples I would address in those? It seems that all the projects that we're doing seem to affect everybody and not a particular area more than another. So if you have a couple of examples for that. The other thing is, it was in the minutes, the mayor at the November meeting was talking about our pass and how we could record the cultural activities of our younger people. Because of the problem we're having with NEETs and the information that's required, so we've got a better picture, we tend to ask schools to try and find that information out, and they're all struggling with that. Because we've a captive audience with our pass, could we somehow track whether students are going to college or whatever, or even put on the application form a question that would help to get us this information that we need to pinpoint them? Thank you.
So thank you, Councillor Rigby. Yeah, there's a lot in actually your question there, in terms of some of the work that we have been doing over the recovery plan, that Sean might want to touch on. I think the link between our pass is critical, and under the youth guarantee, we're working much closer with our pass. I think the sub-regional variances, if you keep it to the ESF programme, we have an absolute ability to work with our localities, and a lot of the evidence now from the work that the research team have been doing, to be okay to target in certain areas. So actually in say Oldham, for example, in Sean's area, there might be a specific need for funding around a certain demographic. And actually in Wigan, that might be different. And because of the way that we work with our localities and the kind of directors of children's and skills in those spaces, we have got the ability to add variation within some of these. I think the youth guarantee will absolutely pick up some of that. Not every area needs the same thing, but every area has got a problem with young people to varying degrees. I think the schools and colleges point in terms of the work that we've been doing is critical, and we have been working with our schools and colleges much closer, obviously during this time, but previously, to help and understand what is required for a lot of young people. So I think with this money, with the youth guarantee, and with local kind of buy-in, really, I think we really have got a good opportunity to nail down some of those variations and the evidence that we potentially need. But I'm actually sit on the RPAS board now. I hadn't done before, so I can pick up some of that in terms of the application and some of the evidence that's in there as well that maybe we haven't shared. So I can make sure that that's flagged.
Councillor Holly, Councillor Fielding would like to come in. Yep. Is that okay?
Charles, you got a second point, I think.
No, I'm right. I covered both points.
Oh, okay, you're fine with that. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Fielding would like to just speak, please. Yep. Councillor Holly.
That's fine.
Thanks, Chair. Just to reinforce the point around our pass that Gemma made, in addition to Gemma joining the board, I've also joined the board because we recognised, even prior to the coronavirus crisis, that our pass was a critical source of intelligence in terms of telling us what young people were doing in terms of their movements. But with the additional offer, over and above the transport offer that Our Pass provides, the intelligence that we can get from what young people are accessing there is going to be really invaluable when we're designing the youth guarantee and other things to support young people in the recovery. Much of the discussion on the last Our Pass board, well, the first Our Pass board that I went to, was around what is that additional offer now. When you've got a public transport system that is running at 20% capacity and most people are accessing learning or whatever it might be from home in the way that we are now, the free transport element of Our Pass is less important. So it's the additional offer that can be attached to the pass, and what we are talking about there is the learning elements that we can add to Our Pass. So not free tickets to the football, or not a lanyard from JD Sports and the kind of nice cuddly things that were on top of being able to catch the 83 into Manchester for free. But you know, what can we offer using Our Pass as the line into the majority of young people, to really provide them with the opportunities that they're going to need to recover more quickly from the crisis than they would do otherwise if that offer wasn't available. So Our Pass has become more important than we perhaps ever expected because of what's happened.
Thank you for that, Councillor Fielding. Any more questions?
No, there's no more questions lined up, Chair.
Okay, I've got another question actually, and that is in relation to page 9 on the report. If I just get it up on the screen. And there we've summarised the Youth Opportunity Programme. And the thing that struck me there was that we're working with 6,000 people who are disadvantaged. And I was wondering what sort of percentage of the population are we actually covering? And what more can we do? If the percentage ends up being quite small, to help this important cohort. Did you?
Sorry, Councillor Holly, my screen just completely froze.
Sorry, I presume you heard my question.
Yes, I did. Apologies.
You were frozen.
No, yeah, there was a freezing of screen. So I think what's really critical in this, for just this paper, is this is only one part of the youth offer, and actually it will play a critical part. There is already a current ESF young persons programme. I think what we are not ready for, and we haven't got the data for, is what is coming. So if we can support 6,000 young people, there will be a huge element that we just do not know will need our support post-COVID. So mental health, well-being, those that potentially may not have triggered into a kind of neat world as such. So we have to be making sure as kind of, and you to scrutinise back to make sure that the offer is making sense and that we're targeting the funding where we can. And that makes sense locally, but also then what is the universal offer for a lot of young people? So a huge element of the youth guarantee potentially could be using GMAX, which has been presented before, around just a kind of career builder, giving that information to young people and the opportunities that are still there. Because I think we are at risk of kind of disengaging our young people because apprenticeships are down and things like that. The colleges and the schools are doing a phenomenal work to try and transition people. So I think ESF can play one part, but there's a much wider that we need to do.
That's a very helpful answer, Gemma. So I mean, it's clearly, my passion for making sure that we improve the skills of all our young people. That's the way forward for this country, and we can see that almost today with the importance of technology, and I'm learning a lot on this. So if there are no more questions, we're asked in the report to To note the progress in Greater Manchester ESF allocation attempts to repurpose and apply flexibilities in response to challenges presented by COVID-19. Clearly, you are responding in terms of changing those priorities. To note the intention to proceed to procurement with the GM Skills for Growth ESF programme, and to note the status of the final CFO application for Youth Opportunities Programme at the appraisal stage with the ESF MA and at present, and delegated authority is the key thing to the Greater Manchester Command Authority Chief Executive and Treasurer for design sign-off following development in conjunction with areas and partners. So that's what we're asked to do. Can I have your agreement to that?
Yes, Chair.
Agreed.
Yeah. Thank you. One thing I would just note as well, which is in the report, at least now there's a bit more certainty in terms of this funding, with the, if you like, the government's guarantee position in terms of whatever happens on Brexit. So that's obviously is good news. So thank you for that. So thank you, Gemma, and thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Sorry, did somebody say something then?
Just thanks, Chair.
Sorry, thank you. I was slightly distracted. Right, so the next thing on the agenda, we got Simon Noakes, who's going to give us an update on the economic recovery. It's a verbal presentation. So Simon, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Well, a huge amount I could say, but clearly it's very much an emerging situation. Obviously, the pandemic started as very much a health crisis, but very rapidly became an economic crisis as well. And I would describe the actions of the government very much as being to freeze the economy, and that was clearly needed given the health crisis. And therefore, because a lot of the support that's gone in and a lot of the actions that have been taken, the economy is still, or has up till recently been in a kind of frozen mode, and it's really only now that we will really truly fully understand the full economic implications of the crisis. Obviously, we've seen a large spike in unemployment in Greater Manchester already, and we don't know how that's going to move over the next few weeks. Obviously, as the economy starts to reopen in large scale, obviously with non-essential retail reopening on Monday, and also as the furlough scheme unwinds at a varying pace, obviously with employers having to make some contributions initially and then larger contributions in September and October, and it's really as we get into those measures unwinding that we'll really understand the full implications on the economy. So we will bring further information and evidence back to the committee as we get it, as the economic situation evolves over the coming months. I think that said, we are making huge amount of preparations for thinking about what might happen to the labour market, and part of what Gemma has been talking about, obviously just recently, is very much in that space about how we can use the flexibility we've got, how we can use some of the funding that we've got, and how we can have conversations with government in order to try and mitigate the worst potential implications on the labour market. I think it's fair to say that everybody believes, even if people think that the economy will recover, there is going to be a huge amount of labour market disruption, because we know that a large number of companies will either close or make people redundant. Other companies are clearly looking for recruiting, and there are some companies who are clearly have seen opportunities from the coronavirus, and I mean that in a positive sense, i.e. that their businesses are actually growing because of the nature of the business they're in. So we're seeing an awful lot of people moving around in the labour market, and that in itself will cause disruption and potential periods of unemployment for people, etc. I think in terms of the recovery piece, I'm with colleagues doing some work on the kind of the recovery across Greater Manchester as a whole, and we have to recognise that we are still very much in the response phase of coronavirus. We're not in the recovery phase. Normally with crises or emergencies, you have a very clearly defined short crisis period or response period, and then you move into recovery. In this particular pandemic, we're obviously dealing with the ongoing effects of the crisis and dealing with that crisis still on a daily basis, as well as trying to think about the recovery phase at the same time. So it's kind of very unusual. And that recovery phase or the recovery period, within Greater Manchester, we're thinking about that in three distinct phases. We're thinking about in the immediate unlock period, which we described as about a month or so ago. We described as kind of 0 to 2 months, i.e., as the economy and society begins to be released from lockdown. Actually, what are the implications on Greater Manchester economically and societally of that? We described the next period as being the living with COVID period, which we described as being from now, i.e. from about a month ago when we first did this work, from about a month ago, running concurrently with the unlock period, therefore, but running for 12 months or so, and actually really that will all be defined by when we have, assuming we do have some kind of vaccine, but until that point we will have to learn to live with COVID. And then the third phase, which again starts now, but runs beyond that 12-month plus period for potentially many years, is the what we've described as the build back better phase, and that is very much about how we rebuild the economy, rebuild society, but actually in doing so, actually how do we tackle some of the social, environmental, and economic issues that we face as a conurbation, and actually build our resilience as a conurbation, and that's what the phrase means in a kind of emergency planning type sense. How do you build that resilience, i.e. learning the lessons of the response that we've made, but also how do we capitalise on some of Greater Manchester's assets, and strengthen and use those assets to build a more equitable, more sustainable economy as we move forward. Obviously, as I say, that we've established a number of principles of issues that we want to try and think about and deal with as we move into that recovery phase, and I think probably the single most important one of those is inequalities, and COVID has laid a vast range of inequalities sort of bare for everybody to see. They were always there, but they've been laid bare for everybody to see, and therefore actually a kind of thinking about inequalities is a huge part of our recovery work. And then within all that total recovery work, obviously economic recovery is a particular issue within that, obviously the particular focus of this committee. And within that economic recovery work, we are thinking initially about the labour market interventions that we need to make, as Jim has been talking about. We're thinking also and working with government around fiscal stimulus. In other words, if government is going to invest some money, and we don't know whether they will or not, but there is talk of a fiscal event in July, not a budget, but a fiscal event. And if there are investments and funding to be made, what would Greater Manchester's kind of views on that be? And then finally, we are what Greater Manchester's input to that process be to support that immediate projects that could help get the economy back on track again. And then finally, we're looking at the whole investment approach that we've taken within Greater Manchester so successfully to date, and looking at how we might sort of reimagine that for the building back better period, and that's obviously a longer term period of work. Ultimately, a lot of this work will feed through into our spending review submissions, which we still understand that the spending review will be in the autumn, along with the budget as we understand it, and obviously Greater Manchester will want to be making submissions into that process to ensure that we're able to capitalise on Greater Manchester's global assets to drive local and UK growth, but as well as doing that as a kind of fairly equitably and in a sustainable way. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Any questions?
Councillor, we've got questions from Councillor Howarth, Councillor Stanton and Councillor Rigby.
Okay.
So Councillor Howarth.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Can you see me okay? Thank you. Yeah, Sue Howarth. May I ask, please, I know you've just mentioned it as you've talked about possible fiscal intervention, Simon. Can you just tell me any more, please, about what you might expect of this? They're describing it a mini budget that may occur in July. Is it only at the present time then thinking about fiscal intervention? And is there going to be an opportunity? You said you'll have some dialogue likely with government. Will there be an opportunity, with this being, I think, the biggest economy outside of London, to actually even make submissions, formal submissions about this mini budget in July, so that you can give views as to what we would want here, particularly to help the North? Because there's already evidence, I keep reading evidence, that the North is particularly going to be badly impacted, is it not? Or maybe badly impacted. Did you hear any of that?
Yeah, you just muted just right at the end, just for about 1 second. So.
I think the only thing I said at the end was the important bit about whether Greater Manchester would have a formal opportunity to give you as regards this mini July budget, because we're seeing reports that, for all the reasons Simon may explain, that unfortunately this economic downturn looks like it's going to particularly impact hard in Greater Manchester and the North. Thank you.
Thanks. Just picking up on those points. I mean, we don't know exactly what the mini budget we don't know exactly what the fiscal event will contain. We are being told that it's not a mini budget, but that's you know, a lot of this is kind of stuff that you see in the press as much as kind of formal information. We do understand that the government's very interested in and trying to think long and hard about the impacts on the labour market, and therefore particularly issues around labour market interventions seem to be an area that may well be a focus for that event in July. And the other thing is that we've now formally had a letter from the Secretary of State for Ministry of Homes and Community and Local Government asking whether there are projects which are, to use the phrase that was used in the letter, shovel ready, which are projects that could start spending and be completed within an 18-month time period. And if we have any of those where planning permission is secured, etc., and they just need some finance to get them over the line, to let the Secretary of State know those in very short order. So that's how we're feeding in.
That's actually very helpful, Simon. And it's the old thing that it's good to invest in capital projects, but so often they take so long. So that strikes me as being very sensible. So are you okay with that, Susan?
Thank you very much, Chair. Unsurprisingly, I'm thinking now about the Skills College in Bolton. I definitely want to see that built.
Yeah. Yes.
We have the next question, Councillor Holly, is from Councillor Stanton. If you could just put your camera on, please, Councillor Stanton. Thank you.
We've got you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that verbal update. It was good to have just a couple of quick follow-up questions. You mentioned shovel-ready projects there and engaging with the Secretary of State to get some of those across the line. When we're picking and choosing our projects that we want to submit and put forward, are we being absolutely sure that they support the whole of the economy rather than just a few subsectors? And then I suppose secondarily, my question would be, to what extent have we started to come up with some very long-term thinking around the aviation and airport sector, obviously Manchester Airport Group being the combined authority's single biggest strategic investment?
You make a very good point there, Councillor Stanton.
So on the first point, we literally got the letter from the Secretary of State. I think it was either last night or the night before. So we're very early stages of we've obviously got a lot of projects that we know about from the whole of the conurbation. The Secretary of State set out some very specific and detailed criteria. So we're just doing a process of assessing the projects that we know about from across the whole of the conurbation against those specific criteria. I think the key thing to stress is that obviously this is one small fiscal event. There will be the significant fiscal events will obviously be later on in the year, and that's where we will have a far greater opportunity to kind of share our views and try and influence the way in which government responds. So that's the kind of the major focus. But Secretary of State is obviously interested in any immediate shovel-ready projects. In terms of the longer term thinking, I mean, we are beginning to do that, and through the local enterprise partnership as well. They are beginning to support the combined authority in that thinking. We are in regular dialogue with the airport, and one of the areas of work that we have started jointly with the LEP is to look at what we're describing as the kind of place drivers of growth. So that is obviously our towns, the regional centre, or cities and regional centre, and also the airport as well as a kind of significant place driver of growth, which affects the whole of the conurbation. So very much in our thinking.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got a question from Councillor Rigby.
Yeah, Charles. Sorry, Simon. It's more for the chair and the committee. It's about your issue that you're taking us through now, the importance of it, and then later in the agenda we're looking at the work plan and what are we building into our work plan about the GM recovery. We can't miss any of this. How it relates to,
can we just leave that, because that's on the agenda for the next item?
Yeah, we just looking whether Simon's views were possible.
It's a very, very valid point, and I think that if you raise that again there, and then we need to build that into the work plan, because our focus will change, which is why at the moment we haven't got even a draft work plan, which we'll be working on fairly shortly. Simon, I don't think. I wonder if you want to make a comment there about the sorts of things that are being developed by the combined authority that that we should be refocusing on.
Chair, sorry, I didn't hear you. You broke up slightly. I didn't actually hear the question.
Oh, sorry. What I was saying. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, just about.
Oh, right. Right. What I was saying was that in terms of the recovery, the point that Charles was making, what sort of initiatives are in place, in terms of, I'm thinking in terms of reporting to the combined authority for the economic recovery that we're trying to assist in this area. So is there anything specifically that any specific projects that are ongoing at the moment?
So the combined authority will be receiving reports on recovery, and over the coming months it will be increasingly receiving reports on recovery. It's still not totally finalised, but I think there's a view that we should be producing some kind of 1 year kind of living with COVID plan, which is really looking at the major actions and issues that we need to address if we are going to live with COVID and drive the recovery at the same time, and therefore I don't know for sure yet, but my strong suspicion is that we will end up with some kind of one year living with COVID plan, which will be entirely consistent with the ambitions of the Greater Manchester Strategy, but rather than updating the Greater Manchester Strategy right now, I think we'll probably move into some kind of some kind of living with COVID plan.
I mean, that strikes me as being eminently sensible, and clearly we will scrutinise that. One of the questions I was going to ask, which is relevant to that particular question, I mean, obviously we know what the issue with regards to aviation, and particularly about the airport. But what other sectors in Greater Manchester, are you really concerned about?
I think at one level I'm concerned about the whole economy is the short answer to the question, because I think the truth is nobody actually knows what of the economy is going to come back as I described it, as we take it out of the freezer, and some parts we're putting into the fridge and some parts we're just taking out of the freezer completely. So it will have different effects on different sectors over time. A lot of, very concerned about the hospitality, retail and tourism sectors particularly, which obviously linked in with the airport to some extent, but the whole, kind of, as I say, the whole hospitality sector, it feels very difficult to see how some companies will manage to be profitable when you have to apply social distancing.
Yeah.
And if even, and I know there's obviously a debate on this going on nationally at the moment, but even if social distancing would come down to 1 metre, if you think about a theatre, for example, that might mean taking out every other seat in the theatre, and therefore you're immediately down to 50% of your capacity, and actually making a profit in those circumstances is going to be very difficult. So it's really any sector that requires large numbers of people to be in the same place at the same time that you would begin to say, actually, that's a sector you really want to worry about. There is obviously also the kind of unknown question about the impact on the office market, and that's obviously going to be a longer term question that will evolve over potentially over many years actually, about what decisions companies make about their requirement for office space moving forward.
You don't surprise me, Simon, with that answer. That I have to say, from my own experience, my family, and one of my daughters works in the hospitality sector, in hotels and with conferences, and they've got major issues. And then the others are working from home and loving it. So I think the whole thing about office accommodation, you're absolutely right. Things are going to change there. So it's interesting and as well as challenging times ahead.
Yeah, and I think the other aspect then, Councillor Holly, is just that if you see a change in the office market, for example, it's the knock-on effect of that onto the rest of the city centre or onto the rest of our town centres as well, in terms of all the restaurants and bars and cafes and sandwich shops even that require, that rely on that throughput and a large number of people in one place.
Any more questions?
Councillor Holly, we've had a question from Councillor King from Salford for Simon. How do we ensure we secure green growth post COVID-19?
I think it's a very good question, and one that's certainly giving us a lot of thought, or we're putting a lot of thought into that. When obviously we had the 5-year environment plan anyway, and that was all about how do we move to a green economy, and one of our 4 kind of frontier sectors in the industrial strategy was very much about the green economy. So we're very much on that road anyway, pardon the pun, on that road as a conurbation. Actually, we've seen a very substantial fall in carbon emissions during the lockdown period, unsurprisingly. One of the kind of questions is obviously as you reopen the economy, those carbon emissions by definition will go back up again. But how do you make sure that you are building back better? How do you make sure that you are taking the opportunity to think about some of those investments, and so think about the way in which the economy works in order to accelerate the move towards a green economy. So I'm not claiming to have quick answers on that question, but it's absolutely the right question to ask, and absolutely the question that we are going to need to think long and hard about as we move out of the kind of lockdown phase into the recovery phase.
Thank you for that, Simon. Any more questions?
No, none received, Chair.
Pardon? None
received. That's it. We've
okay, that's great. Simon, thank you for that update. I mean, it's as I said before, it's very challenging times for you and your colleagues, as well as the wider sort of economy. So a lot to do, and we look forward to obviously continuing updates coming forward to us. And clearly we will build into our work programme the scrutiny of the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
So thank you, Simon. So the next thing on the agenda is the work programme. So what we've got here is we haven't actually got a work programme because we wanted to go back to square one for the obvious reason. Things are changing massively, and as Charles has said, that we need to scrutinise what we're doing to help recovery and what reports are coming forward. So what we're planning to do is to, first of all, for all members of the committee to feed into us any areas that they've got concerns over or they would like us to consider for the work programme. And then the plan is then for the chair and the vice chair and the officers, obviously again by remote control, to look at these plans and to come up with a draft, and I stress the word draft, work plan, and then you can then look at that and approve it or amend it at the next meeting. And I hope that members of the committee think that's a sensible approach under the current circumstances. I would just like to note that I've just had an email today from Mary Whitby, who said she couldn't join our meeting, unfortunately. She couldn't access the chat facility. Well, we'll work that out. And she says she wants to suggest that the report from the Fawcett Society, excuse me, the report from the Fawcett Society on Women's Employability should form an item on the work programme. So we'll put that onto the list, and I look forward to more suggestions, which you can send to Joanne and copy to me and the vice chair. So can we note I suppose, where we are at the work programme and approve that as a sensible way forward?
Thanks, Chair.
Good, thank you. The date of the next meeting is scheduled for Friday the 10th of July. Now, I'm conscious of the fact that today, yet again, we were struggling to get, a quorum, but that may have been more in part to difficulties of logging on, etc. But last year we struggled for quoracy. And in fact, I missed the odd meeting because I had problems with my back, which a trapped nerve, which I have to say has massively improved. So hopefully I won't be making any apologies in the current year. But I say I am conscious of this fact, and therefore, what I would like to know is if this time, and in fact, would probably change it slightly, probably to 10:30, because when we go live again and when lockdown is lifted, I think it's probably better for transportation into Manchester to basically miss the rush hour, particularly if there's going to be social distancing on trams and the like. So at the moment, the suggestion, I suppose, is to keep it at this time, which is 10:30. But if it's a real problem for people, I would just like to know. So I don't think we'll have a debate now, because we know it's not particularly conducive in this medium to do such a thing. But what I would request is that you again send in an email as soon as possible to Joanne with copies of it, myself and the vice chair, to say if this date and time is good or if it's impossible. I don't particularly want to have, so I prefer something else. Let's start with this as a starting point. And as I say, that if you really can't make this, it's really inconvenient, please let us know, and then we will look, in the round as to what we can do. We could move the day, but that is difficult because clearly it's got to fit into narrow windows of opportunity, both in terms of the availability of Joanne and Lee, because obviously they've got other committees to service, and also the timing compared to the GMCA meetings, which obviously we need to do our scrutiny before the key meeting so we can give our input. So if that's okay with you, then I suggest we leave the next meeting at Friday the 10th of July at 10:30. Are we okay with that?
Thanks, Chair.
Yeah,
Okay,
fine.
thank you. So now we're going back to item 8 on the agenda, the Stockport business plan. Now, the action plan, which is right at the end of this report, is actually private business. So what I'm going to suggest we do is that we take the business plan now, but please no questions from the action list. And then if we've got questions from the action list, we'll have to reconstitute another private meeting. So so who have we got to do the presentation on the business plan? Is it Simon?
It is indeed, yes.
Great. Okay, Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll take the report as read in many ways, but just to remind people of the background, Mayoral Development Corporation is a kind of piece of legislation, or Mayoral Development Corporations are a piece of legislation that mayors in combined authority areas are allowed to create Mayoral Development Corporations. And working with Stockport Council, the agreement was by Andy and by the combined authority to create the Mayoral Development Corporation as a specific delivery vehicle within the Stockport Town Centre West area. Obviously, because it is a mayoral development corporation, ultimately it is a creation of the mayor, and therefore the agreement and the way the constitution and agreement was set up is that every year the MDC would produce a business plan, and that business plan would come back to the combined authority for sign off. And this year, obviously, we've got the strategic business plan and then the action plan. But every year that will come back for sign off to the combined authority, and this is therefore going to the June meeting, and then that the MDC could do things that were set out within that business plan, and that's the way. And the same process applies with Stockport Council. So this business plan goes to Stockport Council as well, and therefore Stockport Council and the combined authority both sign off on the business plan once a year, and then the MDC can carry on and do things within that business plan in the intervening period. So that's why it's come to you. Obviously, I should formally note that I do represent the combined authority on the Stockport MDC, so I'm actually on the Stockport MDC board. So that should note that formally for the record. But the business plan that's set out before you, and obviously I'm on that board representing the combined authority. So the business plan set out before you outlines the what I believe are exciting plans, and actually kind of significant early progress in the regeneration and creation of a new community in that particular part of Stockport. And as I say, the business plan and the action plan, not going into any details on the action plan, but the action plan again defines what the MDC will do in the next 12 months. I believe that all the things that it's planning to do are sensible and will promote the aims and objectives of the business of the MDC, and obviously that's why it's here. As I say, we'll be going to the combined authority recommended for approval, subject to your comments this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Before I throw it out of a question, can I ask for one point of clarification? And that's really, in relation to the finances on the plan and the risk, if you like, to the combined authority, which clearly I don't want to go into any detail because that's confidential at this point in time. But what the question is because obviously there are two elements here. There's economic development and there's the financial investment. In terms of the financial side of things and the risk analysis, which Overall Scrutiny Committee would scrutinise that? would it be the corporate committee or this committee?
So the easy, hopefully simple answer to that question is that the combined authority is not investing any money in the MDC body itself. So there are two elements to this. There's the body, which is the MDC, and then there's the investments that MDC makes, or the projects that MDC sponsors. So as a combined authority, we are not investing any money in the body of the MDC, and that body is totally funded by Stockport Council and its funding. So the CA has no risk associated with that. If we were getting involved in any of the projects that the MDC was then promoting, that would come through the normal investment channels of the combined authority, and therefore be scrutinised in the normal way. So those will go to the Corporate Resources Scrutiny Committee.
Oh, Simon, that's great. I mean, I'm obviously I'm glad that we haven't got exposure in terms of the overall investment, and you're quite right. In that case, it should go to the individual project should go to the corporate committee. That's fine. Thank you for that clarification. Right, questions, please. Councillor
Howarth.
Thanks very much. So you would need to guide me, because I was going to leave sort of finance and business case questions to a part B, so I'm not going to do that. But I just want to ask a more general question, if that's okay. But of course you can stop me if you feel that for some reason it's not something we should talk about today. So across there's housing and there's transport within this. And I was thinking about, therefore, you know, what tends to happen is you get news agents, local shops, hospitality providers and so on. And it's just the simple question. So across the thinking on this, is the MDC thinking about the wide hours of the day? And are they considering, in the support role that they have, things like the evening and the nighttime economy in terms of growing the economy in Stockport Town Centre West?
Thanks, Susan. So one of the key things that the MDC has already done is to produce a strategic regeneration framework for Stockport Town Centre West, and that will guide all of the development that happens and all the plans that the MDC has. I certainly can confirm that at the last meeting there was a lot of conversation about how do you create how do you create a community in Stockport Town Centre West rather than just building buildings, and secondly, actually, how do you create a sustainable community in the sense of how do you deal with issues of the climate and the environment as part of development. So actually, I think the short answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is but obviously you need to see the Town Centre West as part of the overall part of Stockport Town Centre. So this is not just sitting in its isolation. This is a particular part of Stockport that needs regeneration, but actually that's part of Stockport Council's overall plans for bringing the nighttime economy back into Stockport Town Centre. And so you need to see it in that context. But the strategic regeneration framework will guide all the development that happens in the Stockport Town Centre West area.
Thank you.
Next question.
We have a question from Councillor Stanton. You can just, thank you.
Thank you. We're in part A at the moment, so I want to just spend a moment just dealing with the general strength and ambition of the project, if I might. I took the opportunity to quickly tour the area yesterday with a project lead, something I reached out to ask to do ahead of this because I wanted to understand a little bit better, and it's easier to do that when you are walking around safely, socially distanced, obviously, an area, as opposed to when you're looking at it on a piece of paper. It's not a declaration of interest, but it's certainly a vested interest to say it's the area that I came from and grew up in. And despite being in Part A, I suppose I'm not afraid to say it wasn't always known as the most salubrious part of Greater Manchester. And I'm really, really pleased to see something like this coming forward, because you're absolutely right and spot on when you say this isn't a development that in isolation only helps itself. It's bordered and surrounded by vast areas of social housing, and some of the social infrastructure that this is going to bring into the new area will also be of enormous benefit, I think, and in my opinion, to those surrounding areas of social housing. So I think it's an overwhelmingly positive plan to regenerate the economy, not only of the area in question, but the whole of the area surrounding it. I think it's really important. And I speak as someone who probably sadly did leave that area a little bit later in life. I think it's really important to create the ability for everybody to want to stay in that area. And I think that this will do this. So to be honest, for me, it was more just a thank you for bringing forward a project like this. It means a lot to me, and I know that it will mean a lot to a lot of people in that area. And if there's ever been a case for having an elected mayor, which has been questioned in the past, and rightly so, then this is probably an absolute testament for needing it. So I just wanted to sort of say that. It was an emotional day seeing it all yesterday. So thank you. That's all I want to say in this part.
That was very nice, actually. Good. I don't know if you want to respond to that, Simon. It's just positive.
No, not particularly. Thank you, Greg. And I'm glad we managed to arrange for you to tour the area.
Very good. Very good. Any more questions?
Yes, Councillor Holly. We've had a question from Councillor King from Salford. Okay. There is a comment about creating a local energy market, which I'd welcome, but can you expand on the thinking of this, please, Simon?
Yeah, so I'm not over all of the details, but I know that that forms part of the green agenda, which is being pursued by the MDC, in terms of actually, if you're going to create over 3,500 homes, actually how do you heat those homes in a sustainable way, and therefore it's about how do you sorry, it's not fully well developed yet, but it's actually about looking at that whole issue of how those homes and other premises will be heated, and therefore how you can do things in an environmentally sustainable way. Secondly, how you can attract environmentally sustainable businesses to that part of the conurbation if you're creating a kind of new community. But I think the reference, and I'd have to just check it out, but I think the reference there is particularly to how those homes are heated, and therefore potentially could you create a kind of local heat network in order to heat those homes rather than other forms of heating. So it's, as I say, it's part of the overall plan around environment and environmentally sustainable developments, but I think that reference is specifically to the heat network. Oh, sorry, should say the heat network opportunity, which obviously needs to be explored in a lot more detail.
Okay. Any more questions?
None received, Chair.
Okay. Well, Simon, thank you for that. I mean, I think I'm sure. No, it's not just Luke, who's obviously supportive of this project. I'm sure we're all very supportive. Although there are a couple of issues that I want to raise as well, but in the private part. So I thank you for that, Simon. And I think where we're up to now is, and we've finished the public part of the meeting. So, Joanne, do you want to guide us through what we need to do now?
What I'm going to do, Chair, is I'm going to end the public part of the meeting, but if all members and officers can stay on the call, we'll still be able to speak. It just won't be broadcast. So
brilliant. Okay.
Is that okay? Right. So
yeah, that's fine. So, I mean, so the thing is, we don't have to sign in again, so we don't need to go through that rigmarole.
No, if you just stay on the line, we'll just end the public meeting. Thank you, Chair.